What's up, everybody? Alex here. Welcome back to another video. And we have a very, very, very special video because this is what I'm going to title something along the lines of the definitive, most exhaustive, hopefully not exhausting, but comprehensive review of all things Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. I'm just honored and privileged to be here in the presence of, at least in my network, one of, if not the biggest Nick Cave fans, the famous Ben Rankins from Australia. How are you, sir? Thanks for being here.
G'day. Thanks for having me, mate. Well, you've really pumped me up there. I hope I can live up to it.
Well, and I will say, and I will put all these below in the description for those who loved YouTube video description boxes. Ben, I think probably years ago now, it's been a couple of years, you did a pretty big series about Nick Cave from beginning to end, showing off all your stuff. So it would have been easy for me to just be like, record, go watch all of Ben's videos, and then have a good day. But of course, I want to reap the benefits from this. So that's why it's on my channel now. I was like, ooh, Ben, I've been meaning to connect with Ben anyway. And now we have like this mutual love affair. That feels a little bit creepy. We have this mutual appreciation for Nick Cave. And so I wanted to reach out and connect with Ben because I know that you are a huge fan. And kind of this idea that I am, for all intents and purposes, a new fan. I mean, he is someone who I've known about for years. I'll kind of semi-walk through a little bit about what my listening experience and exposure has been. But it's one of those things that comes up, like, right? Like you have a personal discovery of an artist and you're like, damn, like this is good stuff, but there's so much. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. Where is my mom? There's like all these different questions. And so I reached out to Ben and I said, look, you are the man. I want a chance to do a video with you and we can talk about all things Nick Cave. So Ben will be doing most of the talking and the showing. I have some records here, but I know he's got everything over there. And so I want to start off, Ben, from your lens. I'm just curious how you got exposed. That feels, I love that word. How did you expose yourself? Like that sounds like, you're no longer allowed at the elementary school. But I know Nick is, he's Australian royalty, right? And so I'm just curious how you got into the guy, giggity, and all that type of stuff, and then we can kind of go all over the place from there.
Well, kind of in the great Australian tradition, it was more him having to go overseas to the UK and Europe and get respect over there before we have a really shocking tall poppy syndrome over here. Now he's like really highly regarded and sells out huge venues and things like that, of course, but we've never really appreciated our own, but now it's just undeniable. The world absolutely loves Nick Cave. And for me, I'd known about Nick Cave for quite a few years when I was in high school and knew quite a few of his songs from the 80s. And we used to have, and you'd often see the videos for them. We used to have this on Friday, Saturday nights, this television show called Rage, and it would just show clips of bands from midnight until the sun come up, and sometimes they would have like a touring artist curate it and pick and nearly all of them would pick Nick Cave stuff on there. And so finally, when I grew up in a small country town, so that was my access to a lot of music, was staying up till 3 o'clock to see once they started playing the weird stuff, which was great. Right. And so cut to me moving down to Melbourne, which is the capital city of Victoria, the state I live in, and going to one of the early Big Day Out festivals, which was, I guess, the equivalent you had was in the 90s was the Lollapalooza festivals.
Sure. Yep.
And that was, I've been to many of them, so they're kind of all smushed together in my brain now. But
yeah,
I want to say it was the first one in Melbourne, because there was one in Sydney first, and that's the famous one that Nirvana played at. And if everyone who claims they saw that show went, and Nirvana would have like sold out all of Australia. Like, it was insane.
Right.
But anyway, from my memory, the one I went to had Iggy Pop, the Ramones, Mudhoney, and Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, who I knew of, and I went and saw them. And it must have been around about the time Henry's Dream album come out. And that was when they had the big ensemble band with Blixa Bargeld and Marty P. Casey on bass, Thomas Widler on drums, and Conway Savage on keys, and of course Mick Harvey, who's been with him from the very start. And
we're talking, what, probably was this early 90s at this point?
About 92, I think it was. Yeah.
Okay.
And and I got to see all those other legendary bands that I mentioned, and just, it was Nick Cave. Just, no, other bands were fantastic, but they just wiped the floor with them. I don't think at that point I'd seen an Australian band just own the stage like that. I'd seen a lot of cool indie and punk bands in very small venues and that, but on a bigger stage like that, I hadn't seen anything like that. And from that point on, I was in.
Yeah. And then you go down the proverbial well of, like, I gotta get in. And we'll talk a little bit about, Grinder Man, I'm sure will come up, and Birthday Party, all these different things. And so you see him, you knew about him, you saw some videos, but you see him live. And similarly, I mean, that was my experience, was like, I was a casual fan, saw him live, and then I'm like, oh Lord, now I'm a fan. So after that point, you're in, it's early 90s, 92, 93. I'm curious for people, like, what was your approach from there? Were you like, I'm going to go back, or I'm going to more, I'm curious of how, after discovering this fandom now, that you're ooh, here's what I'm doing.
I initially got the Henry's Dream album, which was the one they were touring on, and because that was a lot of the stuff that they played at those shows.
Yep.
And then what would have I been, like 18 or 19 or something like that, and I was putting it together, like all those songs I used to see on that TV show I mentioned, and I was like, oh, that'd be all his older stuff. And so thankfully we had some great indie stores over here, and one was called All Go-Go Records, which was also a label. Missing Link Records, which was what I found out that released the early Birthday Party and Boys Next Door stuff as well. A whole ton of those ones. And so, surprise, surprise, I go down, and this is when it was mainly CDs, and there's racks just full of Nick Cave back catalogue sort of thing there. And I was just like, okay, where to start? And I actually went for the cover, so because I just did not know where to go. Just bear with me while I find it.
You got a few things you got to thumb through.
So this was the outside of Henry's Dream. This is the first one I bought, which is Your Funeral, My Trial, which was it's a double 45 kind of double EP thing, and it's probably my favorite of the 80s records of his still. And this has got like Sad Waters, Stranger Than Kindness, which he often still plays live. Jack Shadow, She Fell Away, a great cover of Long Time Man, which I think is that Tim Hardy originally did that song, like a American folk dude.
No.
But yeah, just amazing record. And from then that was like, okay, I want to start from the start. So I found out that From Her to Eternity was his first record, and then probably around that time also I was becoming aware that he was in this band before that called The Birthday Party, which well before my time. So and from the descriptions I heard, I was like, at first I couldn't get my head around it, because of Nick Cave songs are like very especially the earlier stuff, very lyrical and driven by lot of, I guess the 80s you'd call his Old Testament era, where it's all fire and brimstone.
Yeah, I love it.
Kind of thing. And and he's one of those few songwriters where you can actually look at his lyrics on a page and they read well.
Yeah.
And so it was hard for me to justify. He was in this wild art punk band with lots of, screaming and yelling and blah blah. So,
but now I'm curious though. Now I really do feel like I'm interviewing you. By the way, that's why I love this. This is why this is so good. Like I am interviewing you about your love of Nick Cave. What's funny is like I still have never heard anything from the birthday party outside of technically, because what was it, Boys Next Door, which became birthday party. So I don't know if I told you, but for the first time on the tour, I don't know the last time it was played, but he played Shiver in Columbus, and he kind of told a story about it. Now I went back and did like some of the setlist.fm stuff of like, oh, I need to know the set list. And apparently in the gig before, somebody from the audience shouted out that request, and he was like, don't think so. And then the next night in Columbus played it. So he was probably like, yo, band, learn, figure this out. But I've never heard a note of that. But what I also know is that my thought is that the song Shiver is probably nothing like what the rest of the music sounds like, because that's like a ballad.
No, well, the song, he very rarely plays it. I was lucky. It was last year he came out and played a solo piano tour of Australia, and he had Colin Greenwood playing bass with him, and he pulled out Shivers.
That's who was playing. Yep.
Yeah. Unfortunately, just as a side, Marty P. Casey, who's been his longtime bass player, hasn't toured with him for a while. I'm not sure. All I've heard is that he's ill.
Okay.
So, but I don't know why. But anyway, yeah, Shivers was just a really great surprise that he's pulling that out again. And I don't know if you know, that actually was a song that predates The Boys Next Door. Because it was written by Roland S. Howard, who was the guitarist of the birthday party, and he had a band called the Young Charlatans before that, and so that was his song. And
he was like 16 or something, right?
Yeah. And so the Boys Next Door existed for a while without him as a four-piece, and he come and joined them, and he brought that song, and apparently there was a bit of a disagreement over who should sing it, kind of thing. Sure. And Nick Cave, being Nick Cave, won out because he's a pretty strong personality from what I can gather.
You can say that.
And that was like one. They even was videoed at RMIT, one of the universities here in just in the city. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. But the earliest stuff I know of with when they were still the Boys Next Door appeared on this Lethal Weapons compilation, which was on Suicide Records. And so that was like a snapshot of early, Melbourne bands like Teenage Radio Stars, Negative Survivors, sort of not punk, more new wavy sort of sounds. And so Boys Next Door, as you can see on the top there, and they there's a great early photo of them. I think it's on this side. Yeah, there they are. There. This is predates Roland S. Howard.
Okay.
They're looking pretty new wave. Yeah. And so they, does it say on this? So yeah, they do a cover of These Boots Are Made for Walking on here.
Interesting.
And an original called Masturbation Generation. There.
The old classic. Yeah, I see he's not pulling that one. He's not pulling that one out on tour.
No, I'd be surprised if he even remembers that one.
I hope he forgot it as well. Yeah.
So that was kind of like, as far as I know, their first kind of time they were featured on vinyl was on this Lethal Weapons comp. And that's, if you're a fan, that's one of the things you got to have it. And they do a pretty cool version of Boots as well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that was, a bit later on followed up by Door Door, which was the one and only Boys Next Door of sort of this era where they still had that new wavy kind of almost pop sound. And so the first, I think the story goes, is the first side is the four guys who I showed earlier, and then the second side is when the great Roland S. Howard joined the band, and then that side as it ends with Shivers, and you can hear there it's still very much in that sound, but you can hear a change in the band on the second side with Roland's presence there. He apparently, like, he turned up and was very strong-minded and had his own set of ideas of the way things should be, and so it seems like every era of Nick Cave, he has like a guy who he kind of plays off, who he needs that tension sort of thing. So, you know, early on it was Roland S. Howard, then it was Blixa Bargeld, and then it's, you know, for a long time now been Warren Ellis, who they just have that relationship. Whereas it seems like the Warren Ellis one is like, you know, they're best friends kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think the other ones, they probably butted heads a bit in being young and full of heroin.
That'll do it. Now, as you go on to, I'm guessing, birthday parties next. So because I also have to remember that I am a child. My viewers are children. My understanding, and please feel free to jump in and correct how this goes, that did they just sort of become the birthday party? Because like when you look up the birthday party discography, the first record is Boys Next Door record. Like, it's sort of
that one.
Is that?
Is that the one?
No, like I'm saying, like you know, and this is Wikipedia, which is obviously very highly researched and accurate. But okay, and I guess maybe the better question is, what is the transition between Boys Next Door and then Birthday Party?
Well, it was essentially the same band,
Okay.
and except for Roland S. Howard joined the band, and they went over to England as the Boys Next Door and become the Birthday Party over there.
Okay.
And the living conditions over there, they lived in squats, and I think they just barely like were able to have a roof over their heads because they were just like living in squalor, let alone play shows and record or anything like that.
Right.
And so, and which is like, you know, as I said, the typical route for Australian bands for a long time was to go over to the UK and then just get crushed by the conditions over there. And because of, you know, they were big fans of a lot of the music scene, but then went over there and were completely disappointed that it was actually kind of like the Saints when they went over there. It was kind of like, oh, it's more of a fashion and who's cool this week kind of thing, and instead about that, and you know, and that actually, I think those conditions contributed a lot to the sound becoming a lot more aggressive and confrontational, and you end up with the early versions of, they were still, it's a bit muddy, the early ones, because you see this record here, it's credited to the Boys Next Door, but it also says the stickers, the Birthday Party.
Okay.
This is a real early one, which has got Catholic Skin. What's it? Probably the Hair Shirts, the other well-known one. And there's a distinct change in sound from Boys Next Door. It's a lot more angular. Okay. Roland S. Howard's guitar is like just, it's got this real angular sound. He's one of those guitarists who the second he plays, you know who it is. Very distinctive way of playing. And also they seem to be, you know, just lose interest in the traditional kind of verse chorus song structure, and were fiddling around with time signatures and things like that.
So they're a prog band, is what you're saying, Ben?
Not at all, no.
Like, it sounds like Love Beach by Emerson, Lake and Palmer is what you're saying. Yeah. No,
exactly.
Because I've heard it's noisy, right? Like it's
quite and Nick Cave is not crooning. He's like going, he's yelling and screaming and still finding his voice, I suppose. And the like the sound of the band, it's lyrically dark as well, kind of thing. The Melbourne scene was all like, seen as, because up in Sydney it was more like, you can hear it was like a Detroit influence punk sound, because you literally got Dennis Tech from Detroit in Radio Birdman playing in that scene and influencing them. And in Melbourne it was more like a bit more arty punk scene. So so probably not like stuff that you got to work hard to get into it, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah.
And this is like that pretty much that same Hee Haw record, but with a few more songs. I keep forgetting to mention Mick Harvey, who's been with Nick Cave from the very start. The four of them, except for Roland S. Howard, all went to school together.
Okay.
So, I always found there's this funny Roland S. Howard thing of like, because they were known for like being very aggressive, full on shows and taking anything that was put in front of them. And he was asked like, so how bad were they? And he was like, well, how bad can some private school Melbourne grammar boys be, with a wry smile on his face? So this one's got Mr. Clarinet on it, which is that 7-inch there.
Oh, yeah.
And the song Happy Birthday. This is great 7-inch. And also again the hair shirt. There's a bit of doubling up, because there was like between Missing Link and I think that they had a weird thing going on with the record company where there's a bit of those early ones are Get Called Birthday Party or Boys Next Door and things like that. So it's a bit of a muddy discography in the first few records as far as that goes. So because I don't think the distribution and the deals on who was releasing what were kind of like done professionally like they would be with a big record company. So I think Missing Link would release stuff like just because they had the tapes and things like that in all different sort of forms. So,
but definitely although there was some crossover in terms of like, how are we marketing this? Sonically, there's a pretty noticeable difference though between that first and kind of only Boys Next Door record and then stuff that came with the birthday party.
Yeah, apparently when they come back to Australia, like people didn't even realize they were the same band because they changed that much, and a really confrontational style of performing as well. Like if you wouldn't want to be in the front row because you'd probably get kicked in the head by Nick Cave. It was like kind of like the stuff that you imagine when Iggy Pop was in his prime, and just taking it straight into people's places.
Amazing.
Very, very cathartic shows. So, and then there's like another version of Hee Haw as well. So again, more of those songs with some other ones on here as well. So, and it's not probably until Prayers on Fire where they have like the discography makes more sense. So those first few I showed you, there's like same songs on some, there's a new song, different songs. It's a bit of a muddy area in there, but you got to have them all.
You have to.
And so this was the record, which if you're gonna know a song off this, it's Nick the Stripper.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So, and it's also got King Ink, A Dead Song, Zoo Music Girl, and Cry. So, getting more and more like trimming the fat in their sound and getting more and more focused, and still pretty full on stuff. Like they're a band. If there was a time machine and I could go back and see them live, it would be that band.
Yeah.
And there's the Nick the Stripper 12-inch single there, and Kitties, if you have the white one, it's not the original. The blue and the pink is the original.
You gotta tell them.
You don't get a chance to show off very often this stuff.
That's right. That's what you're here for. That's right.
And then this album Junkyard, which I think might be the first time they worked with engineer producer Tony Cohen, who, if you're an Australian, that name would mean quite a bit to you, because he started off in the 70s, producing kind of mainstream music and just working in those studios around here, and become known, even though to look at him, he's a bit of a hippie, he become known as kind of like the punk guy, because he was really into recording stuff live with minimal overdubs and things like that. And he's done like The Birthday Party, Cruel Sea, Be Suburban, lots of great Australian bands from the 80s and 90s.
Awesome.
And this one, after saying the way he captured stuff, their request was they wanted the worst sounding record in the world.
They get it?
One. Yes. They wanted this thin, trebly sound. And they do things like surround Roland S. Howard's amplifier with corrugated iron to get these like really aggressive, harsh sounds on there. It's got great songs, but yeah, I actually prefer the live version of these, and that's also got the what's his name, Big Daddy Roth artwork on the front.
Beautiful.
As well.
That's good artwork right there.
So everything about this they wanted it to be like in your face and kind of crass, I suppose.
Right.
But great record. So this one's got Dead Joe and 6-inch Gold Blade, Hamlet, Pow Pow Pow, which were all like, powerful live songs. Great record. But yeah, if this was the first thing you heard, you'd be like, yeah, I don't want to know anything about this band.
Yeah.
And I've also got the It's Still Living, the live album of around that time. There's give you an idea of where they're coming from with Nick Cave and his "I Hate Every Cop in This Town" t-shirt.
I love it.
So it would have been something else, because Nick Cave's really tall, and then back then his hair was like another foot into the air. It would have been quite an imposing figure on stage. So this was recorded at the Astor Theatre in Melbourne, this one. So this is a live one. So you got a bit off everything here. So you got Nick the Stripper, probably their most famous song, Release the Bats. She's Hit, King Ink, all that sort of stuff. Not a bad recording, actually. Like, it starts off a bit ropey, but then it kicks into gear, sound-wise. So it's a good one to get.
It's funny you mention that. I'm going back to the show I was at a couple of weeks ago, and I feel like after every song, there was 2 or 3 people in the audience that just kept screaming, "Release the Bats."
He'll never play that.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. So it makes sense now, because of course I'm sitting there and I'm like, does this man have a bat? Like, what are we doing? Is he?
Well, that was that's the 7-inch of Release the Bats.
Oh man.
Yeah, which is awesome. Well, these are my 3 birthday party 7-inches I have, which are all original. So the one I showed earlier, the Mr. Clarinet, the Friend Catcher, and Release the Bats.
Beautiful.
So, all awesome stuff. And I think these are all on Missing Link or 4AD, which distributed them in England.
Okay.
But if you're going to get a live one, I would suggest was only on CD in the 90s, but it's had a vinyl release. And I believe it's had a recent reissue too, and that's just Live 81, 82. Okay. This probably is such a good representation of them live, and it's recorded really well.
Okay.
And they would have been such a powerful band to see live. That coming through a PA would have been something else. Would have rearranged your molecules, that's for sure. And they actually, the last song they do a cover of Funhouse, which is wild.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So
that's a great point though, Ben. Like, you would say, like, for what's interesting is, like, someone like me, I've actually had people tell me that, giving me advice, and they're like, look, Alex, you probably wouldn't like the birthday party, just because musically it's typically not my wheelhouse. But if that was still something where I wanted like a snapshot of their career and their sound,
Yeah,
that's a
that's
perfect place to
fantastic.
Yeah. Okay.
Really, really good. There's like a split live one, which is called Drunk on the Pope's Blood.
Obviously.
And yeah, they were, what was it say? November 1981, 16 minutes of sheer hell. So,
Amazing.
and that photo says it all. And it's a split with Lydia Lunch, who early on, when they were touring America, they'd have a fair bit to do with that. I guess it was called No Wave Scene over there with Teenage Jesus and the Jerks and that.
Yep.
And then the last couple of things from the birthday party was they ended with 2 EPs, which a lot of people say like their best stuff they ever did. So there's the Mutiny one, and so this has got Swampland, which is an amazing song. Jennifer's Veil, Mutiny in Heaven, fantastic stuff. And a lot of their stuff is like, especially from about Prayers on Fire on, they're regularly in print or reissued. I think Drastic Plastic, that label, which does a lot of really good punk reissues, which sound really good, did a lot of their records. And then the Bad Seed, which was the very last one. And I didn't mention, by these last two, Phil Calvert, the drummer, he was out. They got rid of him. And Mick Harvey, who's like, been Nick Cave's foil from the start, can play anything. He was playing second guitar up until that point, and then he took over the drum kit.
As you do.
And play. Yeah, he's amazing. I don't know what it was, because he saw something in Nick Cave and just stuck with him the whole way through. Mick Harvey's probably the most musical out of all of them. And in the early days, Nick Cave would vocalize his ideas, and Mick Harvey would work it out on piano. Things like that was how they would write songs. And very important member of the band who, at this point, it's hard to believe now with Nick Cave, he was probably considered the least likely, like, because of Roland S. Howard was just, a guitar god in underground music. And
right.
He straight away went on and joined Simon Bonney's band, Crime in the City Solution, which were fantastic as well. Nick Cave was kind of like
the unlikely
kind of lost in the mix a bit, so, which is hard to believe now because he's such a force of nature. Just one more, which was just appeal sessions of the birthday party, which is really fantastic as well. And that covers kind of like all eras of the band once they were in the UK. This is a double album. That's fantastic too. And so that's the birthday party, Boys Next Door discography.
So that's it for the birthday party. But I noticed, I hope other people noticed that second to last one you showed was called The Bad Seed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, coincidence, Ben?
Well, funnily enough, first of all, this is after that came out, when he was putting together a solo project. Bad Seed seems obvious, right? But thank God they didn't go with Nick Cave and the Cavemen, which was initially one of the names bandied about, which is just terrible.
Just the worst, yeah.
Yeah, so thankfully they went with the Bad Seeds. But there's a little period in between where there was no Bad Seeds and there was no birthday party. And he was living in Berlin by this point. And he lived in the loft of a guy called Christoph Dreyer, I think is how you pronounce his name. And he had an instrumental band called Die Haut. I've probably murdered the pronunciation of that because
this is a deep pull right here, isn't it?
And so this is like they were around for a while before that, and This is called Burning the Ice, and Nick Cave, this is before Bad Seeds, is on, I think, 3 songs: Stowaway, Truck Love, and Pleasure is the Boss. And this is kind of like the link between the Birthday Party and Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. So it's still Nick Cave with a fire in his belly style singing. It's fantastic record, and the rest of it's instrumental. And it's also, just as an interesting point, that bloke there, that's Thomas Vidler, who would go on to be the drummer for the Bad Seeds for a long, long time.
Okay.
Now, just as an aside, the Bad Seeds to me are truly a super group. Through the years, everyone who has played in that band either went on to awesome bands or came from amazing bands. So, a little selection, I don't know if you noticed behind me, I've intentionally put all these bands have links to the Bad Seeds. So,
Of course,
we've got Mick Harvey, of course, solo record. Einstein Neubauten, which I've murdered that as well. That's Blixa Bargeld's band, which Nick Cave apparently saw him on German TV. And if you saw Blixa back then in his full leather bondage suit and his hair like this, and Nick Cave's like, I got to work with that guy. And they're still going. They're amazing. If you ever get a chance to see them live, they'll blow your mind as well. The Triffids, who a great Australian band. That album, Born Sandy Devotional, is one of the great 80s Australian albums. Yep. Probably mining a similar area to Nick Cave during the 80s, but a bit more melodic and commercial than what Nick Cave were. And Martin P. Casey played bass for them, who would go on to join.
I've definitely heard of the Triffids. So
yeah, I've done a video just on that record before. Which is great. I've sold a few records for them too, which I haven't seen any profit from, but anyway.
You never will. No.
Yes. The Dirty Three, of course, Warren Ellis's band. Magazine might seem like a weird one, but that was Barry Adamson. The bass player played on the early Bad Seeds records. Kid Congo Powers from the Cramps and the Gun Club. He was in the mid 80s lineup. Roland S. Howard, of course, who played with him in the Birthday Party, and I've seen over the years him do support slots for the Bad Seed shows and join them on stage and things like that. A weird one called Morphosa Harmonia, which is a collaboration between Thomas Vidler, who we just mentioned, the drummer, with Nick Cave's current drummer, who his name's Larry Mullen, but he goes by Toby Dammit on this collaboration.
Okay. Love it.
And then the Cramps, which this era had Jim Skolvunis, which is the American drummer, who, because Nick Cave had for a long time had Thomas and Jim swapping drums, and one would play percussion. Thomas is like a much more technical drummer, and he's much more of a 4 on the floor, and that's why he ended up in the Grinder Man project. Gallon Drunk, which has got James Johnson, who took over after he was in there for about 2 or 3 albums after Blixa left. Great band, Gallon Drunk. Hugo Race, who Australian guy who was on the riff, I think just the first Bad Seeds record. Great band called The Wreckery, still releasing awesome smoky blues stuff up to this day. And then Ed Cooper, who never recorded with Nick Cave, but he did tour with the Bad Seeds for a couple of years as well. And Ed Cooper, of course, the Saints. That's all I need to say about that.
Right. That's amazing. Well, and I appreciate actually you kind of mentioning that, because I think there is what I would assume for more casual fans, an assumption that the show is Nick, and then the Bad Seeds are just the backing band of random people, opposed to your point of calling them sort of an ongoing super group collective. I think is really important, and it's not just the backing band, right?
Yeah, I think currently it is more driven by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis.
Sure.
Because Nick Cave has got more musical over the years and got better at his craft playing piano and things like that, because he didn't play an instrument at the start.
Right.
Yeah, the Bad Seeds, whichever line up from, you know, especially the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s, they had a big imprint on how those songs would sound, and had a lot of big opinions and a lot of arguments apparently and things like that. And that's what, and Nick Cave would obviously write all the lyrics and have the bones of the idea, and Mick Harvey as usual would kind of direct it, and then they would all pull together and make that amazing sound that they make.
Amazing.
So we'll get into Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds now, finally.
Absolutely. Let's get that's 50 minutes in.
Yeah. You wanted deep.
I sure do.
So I'll start with the 7-inch of his cover of In the Ghetto and The Moon is in the Gutter. So this is a really early single from 1984, and this has got Mick Harvey, Blixa Bargeld, Barry Adamson, and Hugo Race on this one. So and it was actually engineered by a young Flood, who appears on all those horrible U2 records.
Wow.
So that's that, and that same year, 84, was when his debut record came out, From Her to Eternity. Quite often still plays the song From Her to Eternity live up to this day. Does an amazing cover of Leonard Cohen's Avalanche to open the album. He's so young in that photo. It's such a great photo. And on this album, he's got the same band, except this person in the middle, Anita Lane, that was his partner at the time. And she also contributed a lot on this record and early on with ideas for lyrics and things like that as well. Sadly, she passed away a couple of years ago. And if you don't know, you have the Wild God record, right?
I'm guessing.
Yeah. And the last song, the phone recordings that they use, that's Anita Lane's voice.
It's kind of that's heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, a beautiful song. That is like one of my favorite tracks on the new record. But
so they maintained a friendship all throughout that time as well, and she's actually released quite a few solo albums, usually like covers of French Yee girl style stuff, and often produced by Mick Harvey. And so then one of my this would be close outside of Your Funeral, My Trial, my favorite 80s Nick Cave record called The Firstborn Is Dead.
This is important, Ben, is for you to drop these nuggets about your favorites and all that kind of stuff. So
so this is got like just the huge epic of Tupelo, where he brings in the idea of like the floods, and then The King is Born, which he's also talking. It could be like Old Testament Jesus stuff, but also there's allusions that the king is Elvis.
It's Elvis,
well, which is
he played Tupelo when I saw him, and it was like
fantastic.
Yeah.
And they're a pretty minimal band because Hugo Race is already gone, so the Bad Seeds is just Mick Harvey filling in all the gaps, Blixa Bargeld and Barry Adamson and Nick. So not the big ensemble we're used to. So Tupelo is like the towering song on this, but this is kind of called their blues record, but I wouldn't say it's a blues record. They've used their influence of blues to put into this and make it a Nick Cave style record, if that makes sense. So there's literally a song called Blind Lemon Jefferson, which closes out the album. Knocking on Joe's another great one. Train Along Suffering. So it's not a blues record, but you can hear there's an influence from the blues. And like this is probably the start of his fascination with that gothic Southern America, which, you know, culminated in him writing that book, And the Ass or the Angel, which is a great book, but one of the most impenetrable books ever, because he uses heaps and heaps of archaic words which you have no idea what they mean.
Oh, geez. Okay.
And to him, he thought that was pretty funny.
Well, and so here, I think, and this is something I kind of wanted to talk about. I've struggled. Oh man, of course, yeah, you got it all.
Yeah.
I think I've struggled both from the asking of the question and receiving the question of, you know, I'll say, oh man, I just, you know, I was at work and I was like, man, I went to a great concert this past weekend, best concert of my life. And they're like, oh, who'd you go see? I said, I went to go see Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And of course, they have no idea who the fuck I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But they'll ask the question of like, what kind of music is it? And I'm like, I alternative, you know, I'm like, I don't know. And so I kind of going off what you said of like, you know, people call this like the blues record, but like, you know, it's not like people are like listening to Lightning Hopkins and they're like, that's the Nick Cave record that I love, sort of thing. And so at this point in the career, how do you describe what genre are we even into right now?
Well, I've heard a term before which I quite like, ascribed to them in this period in the 90s, as called the new traditionalists.
The new traditionalists, okay?
Yes, because you can hear all of that in there, those that influence, because, you know, Bad Seeds are more a piano-driven band than a guitar-driven band.
Yes.
Even though they have had some of the greatest underground guitarists run through that band. And that's what I think makes them different. So I can hear, like, I wouldn't say that they sound like Bob Dylan or Leonard Cohen, but you can hear the influence, especially lyrically, in there. And then there is that sort of, it's like a, almost, because the band at this point has got half Australian, half European. So it's kind of like an interpretation of American South Gothic blues country, you know, all woven in and coming from the idea with a punk ethos and punk attitude of how you do things as well.
That's a good
it's like I can't just go, yeah, it's EDM, which would be easy, but
right. Well, you know, and of course, then, you know, you have the other, you know, this, like, there's, I jokingly use alternative, right? Like, it's like when people used to, they still do, like, they don't know what to call something modern, so they just call it indie. And you're like, indie was the term to refer to artists on independent record labels. Yeah. So calling the Lumineers indie is not a thing. Yeah. Like, and so similarly, it's like, you know, alternative is thrown in there. We're like, we don't really know what to call it. We're just going to call it alternative. And I think in a lot of ways, post-punk has sort of fallen in that sort of same way, where it's like, well, it's got the attitude, but we're talking the mid 80s and punk is kind of gone. So I guess it's post, but it doesn't sound like The Cure, you know?
Yeah, it seemed to have no attachment to what was going on in the 80s at all, and even the 90s, because, you know, that we know that was, you know, ruled by grunge, and then the explosion of smaller bands underneath Nirvana and all that sort of thing. And they were often on bills with those bands at festivals, but it would have been, if you knew nothing about them, quite a shock to see them come on after all these guitar bands, which was, you know, and then you've got this ensemble of about 10 people on stage and this, like, you know, scarecrow fire and brimstone guy telling you off.
Right. Yeah. And we'll get to this, but, you know, I think the reason I spend a little bit of time talking about that is because, you know, I shared it with you before and other people, like, my introduction to Nick Cave, like so many others, was A Boatman's Call. And so it's like you listen to that record and you're like, oh, this is beautiful. It is just this sweet baritone voice at a piano talking about sex and love and God and everything else. and then you realize that that is not indicative of like of his whole career or even
Yeah.
a lot of it. So
And that is the thing that I love about him in general, is they're always pushing forward.
yeah,
They're never content with the sound of the previous record or the direction. Or every record, they're trying to do something new, which, I would have never have imagined in the 90s that they'd be doing the stuff like they do now, where you can hear like there's loops and electronic sounds and things like that in the mix, which I would have
right.
never have imagined back then.
Oh god, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
not to bury the lead. I don't even know if we'll get to this. Will be like a 3-hour video then. But we said it was comprehensive and definitive and other buzzwords. It's wild listening to things like Ghost Teen is like it's like a noisy ambient, like
Yeah.
it sounds nothing like anything else.
Yeah, I would have to say that's probably my favorite of his modern era records. I think it's an amazing record.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want me to keep on rocking with
Let's
the
keep on.
80s?
So we're entering about what, 1986, 87 now?
Yeah, we're getting to about then, and this record, Kicking Against the Pricks, is all covers.
Okay.
And so it gives you a good idea of like where he's coming from. So this is, got, covers of blues songs like I'm Gonna Kill That Woman, which I think John Lee Hooker did. But then you got Sleeping Analia, which I think Tom Jones made famous. Long Black Veil, old country song. Does a great cover of The Singer. All Tomorrow's Parties, Velvet Underground.
Yep.
What else? By the Time We Get to Phoenix. The Carnival Is Over, which I like because it's a bit of a nod to Australia, which was, I don't know if you've heard of the 60s folk band called The Seekers, which were very big in the UK. And very white bread, not you wouldn't associate them with Nick Cave in any way at all. But it does a good cover. And this is the first one that Thomas joins on drums, Thomas Widler. There. And I think this is sometimes you see cover albums, you think, oh, they run out of ideas. But I think this is really successful because they put their own stamp on it.
Right.
And which I like covers. It's like, why cover it if you're going to play it exactly the same?
Right. Yeah. His interpretations of those, and that was their third studio record. So I mean,
yeah. And that's the 12-inch of his cover of The Singer, which that's a great photo. I love that.
Yeah. Does he even play guitar?
On the B side of this, he does a cover of Roy Orbison, Running Scared.
Oh, beautiful.
And Black Betty, but does it like the old a cappella style. Which is
not
really cool.
like the Ram Jam style.
No, not like Ram Jam.
Fantastic.
And then I'll just quickly go that one because I've already showed Your Funeral, My Trial, which I just think this and The Firstborn Is Dead, if you're going to get into the 80s, would be the two I would start with. Brilliant.
Would you say, and maybe this dates back to stuff he was doing with like birthday parties and stuff like that, but I don't know. I'm kind of a sucker for album titles, and I kind of love all of those. Like Your Funeral, My Trial, like From Her to Eternity, brilliant. Like the Firstborn, brilliant. That's the one that hits me though. What is it? Your Murder, My Trial.
Your Funeral, My Trial.
Your Funeral. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Because I was gonna ask if like this is where sort of the like, you know what? Like I'm gonna start really leaning into like the death and the despair, murder ballad stuff we'll talk about later. Like all that kind of stuff. Like, is this where this is also all starting to kind of a little bit?
Apparently he was an avid reader of the Old Testament Bible in the 80s.
Okay.
Along with like this is when he's full swing into this book and the Ass or the Angel.
Okay.
Which was his first published book. And so it's like I keep saying, it's a mix of that style of Fire and Brimstone plus American Gothic things going on. So when you listen to the records from this kind of mid to late 80s, they all sort of bleed in with ideas from the book and the lyrics as well. Like, yeah. So I think on the back of this, like they compare this to like a Faulkner
Oh, wow.
novel, which is pretty highbrow shit apparently.
See, now I'm sitting here and I got this big stack that I was showing you, but I have none of what you've shown.
Okay. Let's keep on.
Let's keep on
keeping on. So now we got the 7-inch of one of the most towering songs of Nick Cave, which is the Mercy Seat, which
beautiful.
This is an amazing song, and it is one of them songs where, as good as it is on the record, when they would play this live, it would just blow your head off. It was quite an amazing live experience, that song, because it become another thing when they played it live.
Now here's what's funny though, Ben. The first time I heard that song was on this record.
Yes.
Which is just him at a piano. So I was like, oh yeah, the Mercy Seat. It's like that piano ballad song.
Yeah.
And then he plays it live in the style, and I'm like, oh, this has got a whole different vibe to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had been doing still in the 90s, there's you can probably see it on YouTube of him playing pared down versions of songs of that kind of around that time, where acoustic-y sort of piano driven, and I do like that version of the Mercy Seat. It's good. Beautiful. And then also the 12-inch of Deanna, which was another one of his well-known ones. He hasn't pulled it out for a while, but he would regularly play that one. Killer song. I like this, how, I don't know if you can see in the front, there's little horns on his shadow.
Oh, of course, cute. Yeah.
And then on the back he's got the halo.
Beautiful. I love it.
And so both of those, Deanna and the Mercy Seat, come off this record, Tend to Pray. And this is like, it probably, those two songs are such big, like you got the big epic song, and Deanna's kind of almost like a catchy, pop song's the worst term, but it's for him.
Yeah, it's got some. It's accessible.
Yeah, it's kind of like you forget how good the rest of this record is, because you've got beautiful songs like New Morning, which ends at the City of Refuge, which is another intense song in the style of the Mercy Seat. And this is the album where Kid Congo Powers joins the band from Gun Club and the Cramps. And you've also got Roland Wolf in the band at this point, who sadly, he only played on this record because he got killed in a car accident, apparently. But apparently he was like a really talented pianist. But this is probably the end of a certain period of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, which those records were getting more and more intense, lyrically and musically adventurous in that. And it was also where he'd hit the tipping point with his drug use as well. I don't know how he functioned the way he did, because they would regularly tour and regularly put out records every 1 to 2 years.
And he was like full blown, like he was like heroin addict, right?
Yeah. And he was writing a book at the same time. So, there are, I guess there's that term of functioning addicts. So, but it gets you in the end. And so then following that was this, 1990, The Good Son, which apparently was like the first record where he was like completely clean and reckons he was like shitting himself. Is the stuff good enough and blah blah blah. But then of course this has got the amazing Weeping song on this album.
Oh, this is a weeping song.
Yeah, which he shares the vocals with Blix Bargeld, who you think that Nick Cave's got a baritone. Wait till you hear Blixabargeld. And the B-side has the beautifully titled Cocks and Asses.
Well, obviously. I've entered the chat. This is 1990. You said,
yeah.
This would be this is where I enter. I guess this would be the first record that I have.
Yeah, and the other famous song off this is, of course, the Ship song.
Yep.
Which he still often plays that as well.
Yep.
And I think this was around the time he was spending time in Brazil. He'd got out of Europe, and he actually had a partner over there, and he's got a son with her, as well as like the two sons, the twins who we all know about, who tragically one of them died, and another son from a relationship in Australia who also died, which was losing one would be hard to imagine, but two within the space of a few years would be devastating. And he somehow brings that grief in and turns it into something amazing. So
great art,
yeah. And then this is where I came in to seeing him live, which is Henry's Dream, which I love this record, and apparently he hates this record. But really? I think it's got more to do with the experience of this record, because they recorded it with David Briggs, who's famous for doing those early Neil Young records.
Okay.
And he was, very much like Neil Young, of getting it in the room and live, and that's that kind of thing. Right. But they were to the point of like, well, we completely fucked up that part of the song. We need to go and do it again. And he's like, no, it'll lose the essence. And they butted heads a lot. But you can't argue with the album that's got I Had a Dream, Joe, Papa Won't Leave You, Henry, Brother, My Cup Is Empty, and Loom of the Land is a beautiful song, and ends with Jack the Ripper, which he used to play that live quite a lot as well. And by this point you can see they're quite a big band.
Yeah.
So you've got Conway Savage now on keys and Marty P. Casey on bass. And then, Nick Cave, Thomas, Mick Harvey as usual, and Blixabargeld. So
I will share a bet in that. When I posted my video several weeks ago and I was asking people like, hey, I just saw Nick, blew my mind. Like, where do I go? Like, what do you recommend, sort of thing? I would say there were three records that stood out that it seemed like were overwhelmingly the ones that people recommended. Tender Prey, which is mentioned. Let Love In. But by far away, the top was Henry's Dream.
That's interesting.
Right?
I would have thought that this would have got kind of forgotten in the mix, in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's sort of before things went really, when he became a next level artist in the 90s. So it's kind of just teetering on that edge.
Right.
Getting back to the story of like they didn't like the sound of that record is why we have this fantastic live record called Live Seeds, which is pretty much all of those songs live.
From Henry's Dream?
Yeah, but it opens with an absolute cork-up version of the Mercy Seat. It's amazing. And they do a fantastic cover of Nina Simone's Plain Gold Ring.
Of course they do.
Which is brilliant. And this was only available on CD for a very long time in the 90s, and I think this is a Record Store Day release. But I think it got released anyway.
Okay.
Afterwards, so if you want it on vinyl, and it's a really great sounding record as well. It's good and a good performance. So a different kind of Nick Cave to probably what people think of him now. It still had that fire, in there. Like, really, really good. And then the one you were talking about, Let Love In, which this, what can you say? When it opens with Do You Love Me, and it's got Red Right Hand and all those great songs. But even the deeper cuts on here, like Love a Man and Nobody's Baby Now. Yeah, I always like that one, Jangling Jack. It's just pretty ramshackle and wild.
Yeah. Now, I'm always curious on these things. So, didn't Red Right Hand, arguably one of his most, if not, popular sort of song. I'm sure it's a staple in all the live sets. But that have like a semi blow up because it was wasn't it in a TV show?
It's on the X Files.
It was the X Files.
Yeah.
Well, nothing says 90s, TV like the X Files.
Yeah, that was huge back then, the X Files. So yeah, to get a song on that, it's quite an achievement.
Am I speaking out of my beer ass here? Wasn't it also in Peaky Blinders?
Oh, you're probably right. I know Peaky Blinders, but I haven't seen it yet. So.
Okay, yeah, because I think like that, obviously X Files was huge around the mid '90s. I could be making this up. I don't know. I feel like it was one of those Peaky Blinders. I've never watched the show. I know well about it, but it was one of those things of like, oh, the song was in Peaky Blinders, which is a new show. It's been around for 7 years maybe.
Yeah.
And then of course that brings it all back. And so my question for you was going to be, was this a banger when it hit, or was it like a retroactive banger because pop culture got a hold of a song later and then, yeah.
Well, I don't. It depends what you mean. As far as sales go, I think he progressively, each one did better than the previous one in the 90s. Right. But I don't think it come out of the blocks and just destroyed everything.
Sure.
It was still at this point, there's probably a lot of people who were like, I don't even know who Nick Cave is, but but he was regularly playing theatre size and bigger shows at that point. So 5,000 people or more. So it was it's kind of a transition and musically as well. I think there's a big influence from Conway Savage with his organ playing on here as well, and really sharpening kind of their hooks for choruses and things like that. There's some really memorable choruses and hooks in those songs. So really, really great record. And it also has a cast of thousands doing backing vocals, including one of my favorites, Sexy Tex Perkins from the B Suburban. And I think Roland Howard might be on there somewhere as well from memory. And there's the Love a Man 12-inch single off that record. And this has a really weird B-side. It doesn't have a song title. It just says it's a selection of largely improvised ad-lib pieces of music recorded direct to DAT over the last couple of years. And it's just kind of all weirdly edited together. So it's everything from music to just grabs of dialogue in the studio. It's bizarre, but it's kind of cool.
Amazing.
So that's a nice one. And then what we talked about earlier, Murder Ballads, which they refer to as the comedy album.
I gotta tell you, Ben, when I was going through here, and granted, to be fair, I'll be honest, I bought a lot of these albums in a very short amount of time. I think I went to my local or one of my locals the day after the concert and just went through the bin. I probably bought 6 records, So I didn't get a chance to listen to all of that. I listened to all of them, just not repetitively.
Yeah.
But this stood out to me. Now, maybe because I'm a sucker for a murder ballad.
Yeah.
But also O'Malley's Bar.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's just
amazing.
What is it, 14 minutes or something like that? I mean,
yeah, it's crazy.
Just absurd.
And this is which has Where the Wild Roses Grow, which took him to another level, which is the duet with Australia's pop princess Kylie Minogue.
That's right.
That's right. Which was how the hell does that work? But they just he apparently had a real set idea of her doing the vocals, and they sent a version to her with Blixer singing her part, and it's actually on that B-sides compilation. It is creepy with a capital K when
Oh
he
man.
sings it. It is amazing. And they're kind of like, probably was shocked that she said yes after hearing that. And so that, this took him to a whole other level. And he was like, at this time, I've read in interviews and that he would often bring Kylie out on stage at things, and he would be either, if their paths cross, and he would either have like his fans at that stage, what are you doing with her, kind of thing,
Right.
and then he would be like, she'd invite him on at one of her shows, and he'd be like, those teenagers are vicious, man. They just hated him.
Oh yeah.
Which I love all of that. But and this has also had the great Henry Lee, the duet with PJ Harvey.
Yeah.
Which you see in that film clip, two people getting a bit handsy, and they ended up together. Which is how we ended up with the next album. Good segue.
Right.
Because PJ broke his heart, and that's how we got this.
Man.
And so we go from like Murder Ballads, which is the big ensemble record with the huge Bad Seed sound, to such a pared back album with barely any instrumentation on a lot of the tracks, which is kind of amusing when you see the back cover photo of how many people
it's
are
like
in
a big band,
Seeds.
right? Yeah.
And this is the first appearance of Warren Ellis.
Mm.
As a Bad Seed. Apparently he played stuff on Let Love In as well as Murder Ballads, and apparently Nick Cave goes, I don't remember him being there at all, but I know he played it.
Sounds right.
Yeah, because I think he was back on the gear by then. So but this, as you said, this is a beautiful record. Into My Arms he plays all the time now, but songs like Where Do We Go Now But Nowhere, People Ain't No Good, Are You the One I've Been Waiting For, I particularly love that. And West Country Girl, a little bit of a, after all of the forlorn, heartbroken stuff, is a little bit of a go at PJ, West Country Girl, and Far From Me as well.
Black Hair I've always loved. And I didn't realize, I don't know if this was a hit down there, but People Ain't No Good is on the Shrek soundtrack.
There you go. It's amazing where these songs turn up to me, but you can't blame them. It's hard to make a quid out of music these days. So we say, it's not selling out anymore. It's cashing in.
This is so funny because I don't know. I don't know if you do this in your YouTube kind of world, but like you have like these kind of like crackpot ideas that you're like, that's a brilliant idea. I have no idea how to like formulate or communicate this into a video. And
that's every video I make.
You're like, I just do it, But there are certain ones where there's certain artists where it's like what your favorite is, or where you got introduced to, or like what set it off for you, might be what you recommend, but is also not necessarily indicative of the artist as a whole. And so it's interesting because this is what I would just call like a piano ballad record.
Yeah.
And so if you're into, and you're like, oh, I've heard Nick is, super aggressive and in your face and talking about murking people outside in the back alleys, this is one of my favorite records of all time that I've ever heard. I love this record, but I don't know if that's going to be what fits what people's expectations are.
Yeah. It was an anomaly at the time, for sure. But it is a high point for sure. Like it's one of those three for me. Like Henry's Dream, Let Love In, and The Boatman's Call are like top shelf Nick Cave in my opinion.
And I also wonder too, like the I don't know if this means anything or if this is just part of the art, but I feel like there's an element of, I don't want to say growing up because that has a negative connotation to it, but between this picture and this picture feels
Yeah,
like two very different artists,
yeah, for sure.
you know?
Yeah.
Like this is like Bowie on crack.
Yes, that's a great description.
This is like Nick Cave
Mm.
on crack. No, you know, yeah. It is funny though. You mentioned him earlier, but this is so. This to me is like so like Bowie meets Iggy Pop, right? Like,
Yeah,
the idea was that "Let Love In" was carved in with razors into his chest and all that type of shit, right?
yeah, no. Yeah, on an old documentary I saw of him, like which was a made-for-TV thing, he points out straight away of like early things he liked, and of course we all know he loved the Saints, but Raw Power, it was all the cover when he,
Oh yeah,
and then when when he heard the music, it was like wow, but yeah, just that
yeah.
image, yeah. So it's
That's
cool that you brought that up, that similarity of that kind of look.
yeah.
All right, yeah. Now we move into another era. If we're around 2000 now, and he'd
Right.
he'd
Yeah. To
been
give the reference, Bowman's Call was 97, correct?
yeah, so it'd
And
been
now
a
we're
few years. It was probably at this point his longest stretch without releasing a record. And so the story goes, he had a bit of writer's block at that time.
mm,
Um, but he come back hard with No More Shall We Part, double album, just amazing record. And
love
this
it.
is also on, I think, pretty much every song. He's got the McGarrigle sisters sing backup on there. Who I can't remember which one, but one of them is like the mother of uh, Loudon Wainwright the third was her husband, and Rufus Wainwright and Martha Wainwright,
Okay.
her kids, and but they've been like singers in their own right for years and years, and collaborated with them on this record, and it works really, really well. And this was a fantastic tour. This was a really, really good tour, and
Yeah.
it's got a lushness to it as well. This record, there's a lot more strings come into this,
Yep.
like and beautiful love songs to the equivalent of like Into My Arms. So things like Love Letter, which is amazing song.
Yep.
But then you get like The Sorrowful Wife, which is a favorite of mine, which I don't know if I've seen him play that live, but I like the way and my wife is moving the furniture around. For some reason, I always like that lyric.
Right.
Um, and yeah, 15 Feet of Pure White Snow was the first single off this, I think, or maybe it was As I Sat Sadly by Her Side. But anyway, 15 Feet of Pure White Snow is such a fun film clip. It's one of the what I call the dancing Bad Seeds film clips. There's a few on Let Love In where they have them, and it'll be just like one of the members, and they'll like pull out all their moves, and there's some pretty funny dancing going on. It's great, and it's got a few people like Jason Donovan weirdly appears in the film clip, and the Australian actor Noah Taylor as well. Jason Donovan looks like he's having the time of his life. I think he'd had a few shandies before he was filmed. So,
Sure.
but fantastic comeback record. I love. It's an underrated record, I reckon.
Yeah, and I mean, this was another one of those that stood out big time for me, and maybe that's because so much of my love was with Boatman's Call, and this is not a far cry from that.
Mm.
But I think also, it's kind of interesting, right? This is one of the few records I feel like this record sounds like how it looks,
Mm.
and how like No More Shall We Part, beautiful artwork, like it sounds like it should in terms of just how it's presented, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Great record.
Beautiful
So
artwork.
next
Go ahead.
up, which I've heard Nick Cave describe this one as one of his ugly children, which is Nocturama. This is a bit maligned, this record, after being like a critic's sweetheart for nearly his entire career. This one was regarded as kind of Nick Cave going through the motions in a way.
Yep.
And I can see that, but I would also argue that even a pedestrian Nick Cave record is at the very least a good record.
Still pretty damn good. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I know I'm biased, but I don't think he has any out and out stinkers at all. I think for that a period of time to have the bar so high is incredible. I reckon.
But where does it fall for you personally? Does this fall towards the bottom?
It's probably would, but then then when you put it on and you hear songs like "Wonderful Life," which opens it, and "Bring It On," just to hear him sing with Chris Bailey from the Saints,
Yeah,
is fantastic. It's the most closest to what you'll get of Nick Cave doing a straight ahead rock song.
right.
And There Is a Town has a nice kind of dark sound to it. I like that. But there's things like Rock of Gibraltar, which is a bit like, whatever. And I think Babe I'm on Fire, as a listen, it's one of them epic long songs, but it does get a bit much, and it's much better to watch it with the film clip because the film clip's pretty funny.
Okay. Yeah.
And it would not pass muster these days because there's a lot of non-PC moments in it.
Sure. Well, that was what was funny. I was looking forward to this because this is the most recent record I picked up. I picked this up last weekend. And mostly just out of that, I didn't see it around here, and I was in a different city and I was in Austin, Texas, and I saw it at the local store, and it was on sale. I think it was $22. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I looked at the time period too, and I was like, this sort of fits the time period that I connect most with. And it was funny because I posted a video about it, and somebody commented on it who must have found me from like my Nick Cave videos, and kind of said he echoed exactly what you said, which was maybe lazy. This is at the bottom. Even quote unquote the worst Nick Cave records are still pretty good records. But this certainly still falls in what I would and others have called sort of that introspective, more mellow sort of feel.
Yeah. So that one kind of set up as kind of like, because I'm negative because with all my favorites, I'm always who have a good run of records. I'm always waiting for the shit record.
Right.
And I was kind of like, wouldn't say that was shit. As I said, it's still a good record. It's just not brilliant like a lot of his other stuff. So it was kind of like, has he hit like that point where he's going to go into this mode of this kind of singer-songwriter, nothing exceptional, but just the craftsmanship of songwriting's there kind of thing. Those kind of thing. You can see the craft, but it doesn't blow you away or anything. So it was kind of like, what the hell is he going to do next?
Now, this might be semi-loaded question. I mean, at this point, though, and over the previous, I guess, 10 to 15 years at this point, you're following along, right? So, like, there's a new Nick Cave album that comes out tomorrow. You go and buy that album, you listen to it. So you've experienced these as they were being released in that sort of vacuum. And so I'm curious if, maybe a loaded question, but I'm curious how your opinions have changed, if they've changed based on the first time you heard it back in 2000 versus how you hear it today in 2025.
No, it's a valid point because I think when I did first hear it, it was a little bit of a letdown. I think the first song's pretty strong, and then I was kind of like, this is just sort of slipped into a mode kind of thing. But over the years, I wouldn't say I love it, but I appreciate it a lot more. It's it's obviously not the first one I'm going to reach for when I want to listen to Nick Cave, but when I put it on, I'm kind of like always pleasantly surprised. It's just it doesn't except for the last song, doesn't overstay its welcome. The songs, you can hear the songcraft in there of people who've been doing this for quite a while now and know how to put together a solid song. But
Yep.
yeah, I guess it's a Nick Cave fan album, I suppose.
Sure.
You're still going to appreciate it on a certain level.
That's right.
So yeah. So
it's
then,
like, it's his worst album. It's still an 8 out of 10.
Kind of, yeah. And it was also the last record with Blix Abargeld, who had been with him, and it was pretty much, he was like, apparently he was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this music. I don't know where I fit in, because he was always come from this really avant-garde, weird angle, and added that element to the Bad Seeds, which was always exciting. And apparently, he did hardly plays on that record. And then he was gone, and James Johnson joined. And instead of being solely on guitar, that meant they had he's a good keyboard player. And the great thing was Mick Harvey, who'd been there the whole time, finally got to shine. And it was kind of like, he's like, I can play fucking guitar as well. Check this out. And this just amazing double album just blew, and and again, a left turn, brought in like a gospel backing singers here, epic, huge sounding songs, Abattoir Blues, Lyra of Orpheus. The deadpan answer that Nick Cave would always say with people asking him why a double album, is like, well, one album we had a heap of songs with one of the drummers, and the other album was mainly featured the other drummer. That's about all he gave away about the stylistic shift of the sound. And definitely, the stuff that Jim is the main drummer is more 4 on the floor solid. So you've got like, those big songs like Get Ready for Love and There She Goes, My Beautiful World, and all that sort of stuff, which are, big sounding songs in that, almost a throwback to the early 90s Bad Seed style of this big raucous sound. But then, you also got, beautiful things on the second album, The Lyre of Orpheus, like Breathless and Easy Money, and Oh Children, which is like, I think he's still playing that live as well.
That was a very big one. Beautiful.
But yeah, this is like, just when you like, what can he do next? And he pulled this out, and it was like, just, I said it before, this is a corker, this record. And oh man, the live shows, that was great. That was when he started incorporating his kung fu kicks into his stage thing.
That's a big deal. Yeah, I mean, that's signature now.
Yeah, and it was also the start of Nick's battle with his hairline as well.
Wouldn't be the only one. Yeah.
Yes. I thought for a while there he was handling it well, because he just got it cut short. And then when this came out, Grinder Man, which was...
Explain to us the Grinder Man here.
Okay. It started as this project, which was kind of mini Bad Seeds, because if they're such a big band, they couldn't always be all together all the time.
Yep.
And so this is the first things he started doing outside of Mick Harvey, who had been a big part of the creative side and and arrangement of the music and production, and he has a big hand. Even all those reissues of his albums that come out a few years ago, he oversaw all the remastering, even though he wasn't in the band at that stage. Like, he still has a relationship with the band, with Nick Cave and that. And so this one, on the inside, you've got that great photo. He said we all had to decide to make a midlife crisis rock and roll record. So they all grew beards and their hair. And so you've got, at this point, Marty didn't have a beard, but he did later on bass. Jim Scalvunis, the drummer who came from the Cramp, so he's the more hard-hitting drummer than Thomas. And of course Warren there, he never went back from that look and just got more and more silver as time's gone on.
Yep.
and Nick with the big handlebar mustache there. And this was kind of them kicking out the Jams album. It's noisy, loud. Warren plays this like mini. It's I can't remember the name. It's like a Fender, but it's like a. It looks like a very small Stratocaster. There's a name for it, but
Okay.
it'd have that many pedals, and they were so loud, and and just give you an idea. It's like when they said it's a midlife crisis rock and roll record. No Pussy Blues is like this was the I think that was the first single off this album, and that kind of the title says it all. Where he's sad as a middle-aged man,
yeah,
and it's like this is probably the loudest, wildest thing that they had done since the birthday party.
Yeah.
People tried to compare it to that, but I wouldn't say it's like as angular and as arty as that. There's a lot more for you to grab onto if you do like melody and big choruses and things like that in there. So, but it's definitely got a big in your face sound. It's great, and they toured this where when I saw them with they would do half of the show and play this album, and then come back on as a 4-piece and do Nick Cave songs from Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, which was good because there was quite a few deep cuts because I kind of had to rearrange how they could play stuff because there was less of them.
Right.
And by the end of the show, in typical Nick Cave deadpan style, he's like, "Oh, this seemed like a good idea at the time, but this is just going on and on."
That's fun. Well, I loved how you kind of presented that is their kick out the jam sort of record. Well, and I think too, like it sort of makes sense. Like it's not a side project in the sense of Nick went off and found some other people to make a different project. These were members of the Bad Seeds that were around because maybe 15 people couldn't be all in the same place at the same time. And they're like, let's make a rock and roll record.
Yeah. And then it was like really well reviewed as well. People loved it.
There are a ton of people out there who I hear say like I prefer Grinder Man over like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds.
I can understand that if you're a person who comes from more of a rock and roll, guitar oriented taste, but and that Grinder Man I think had a really big influence on this record, Dig Lazarus Dig, the Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, because this is a lot more guitar-y, this record, and the songs were had a bit more grunt in them. Strangely, this is kind of they did this tour and played these songs, and I don't think I've ever seen him play any of these songs again since. And I think it's a strong record. I don't mind it at all. Not one of his most amazing records. I think it's a really good record, but they sort of seem to have just we've done that. And this was Mick Harvey's last record. Apparently he was getting annoyed when they played this live because when they came back after the Grinder Man sessions and tour, everything was kind of louder than everything else,
right?
And he was like, we're just destroying the when they do their older songs with noise, like we're not there's more detail in those songs and we're just bludgeoning them to death kind of thing. And I think and also at that point it was coming to a head. He was like their de facto manager, and there was some story where he said, at this point I spent more time on a laptop than playing guitar, so and and I think he's also based in Melbourne, where the rest of them are all over in Europe. So but an interesting album. It's got a great closer, the long song More News from Nowhere. I think it's a bit of a different lyrical style on this for Nick Cave as well, kind of where he not as like is more non-linear than his other stuff. He used to write more as like from a character's point of view, and it'd be almost a story-based thing within the song. The song Dig Lazarus Dig's a killer. Albert Goes West. Like, it's kind of a Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds rock and roll record in a way as well, but not as in your face as Grinder Man. But
Yeah,
worth checking out. Like, if you're by this point, you're already into Nick Cave, so you're getting this anyway.
of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then that was followed by another Grinder Man record.
Yeah.
Which the imaginatively titled Grinder Man 2.
2.
Yes. And this is all this one. This gets out there on some. There's a bit longer songs. There's almost like a heavy psychedelic feel to some of them. Like in things like the Bell Ringer Blues and what was the other one? Oh, Mickey Mouse and the Goodbye Man. The first song, like, geez, that comes out of the blocks like a rocket. And this tour was incredible. I think it's the closest I would in my lifetime ever get to seeing the aggressive Nick Cave, which would have been like in the Birthday Party.
Right.
We were right up the front and we were basically holding the fallbacks on stage because he was smashing into them so hard. And Warren Ellis was rolling around on the floor, hitting bloody effects pedals with his hands and feet. Half the time you could just see his boots in the air, kind of thing. and it was so loud,
man.
And apparently a lot of this contributed to some hearing problems afterwards. I don't know how bands don't wear earplugs. It's insane.
Weird. It's not punk, man.
Well, I think listening's punk. Being able to hear.
You could say so.
But this is great. I probably like this better than the first one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite a powerful, great record. There was also a remix record of this, which I don't actually have, but I see they're reissuing all of the Grinder Man stuff.
Okay.
And I think I'm interested to get the remix one because weirdly, I think it's on Heathen Child. Robert Fripp plays the guitar solo on it.
Oh, and we are sending our love and support to Robert Fripp, who recently suffered a heart attack.
Yes.
So who would have? That was the segue there. I want to rewind just a touch because I meant to bring this up, but I forgot. And it might be you would know better than me if it's worth bringing up. I want to go back to this really quick from not the musical standpoint. Was this his first record clean, or was that?
I think that was. You're probably right. Because because The Good Son was meant to be his first one where he's supposed to have been clean and made a concerted effort to be, but he obviously fell off the wagon.
Okay.
During the 90s. Yeah, I think Nocturama was a bit of a lifestyle change from that point onwards. Yeah.
See, it was like the point I made in an earlier video that you and I were doing, Ben, when people... Never mind.
Okay, I was wondering where you're going to go with that.
No, I was disrespectfully was going to go with when people kick the habit, the art suffers. No.
Well, it obviously didn't because, again, after such a few records where it was big sound, rock and roll front and center, this amazing record came out, Push the Sky. And this is also where the appearance of Nick Cave's decided to get plugs, and looks like these days he just looks like he's wearing a wig. He's got such a strange hairstyle these days.
Yes.
And when you see him outside, you're like, because he often comes to Melbourne, when you see him in real life without all the stage lights and stuff, he's a weird looking dude. Like, he's tall and skinny, but he's got, the age of a 60-plus-year-old man face, but jet black hair, and he dyes his eyebrows jet black as well. So in the cold, hard daylight, he's a weird-looking dude.
Weirdly, yeah, it's like a Skeletor, right?
And I love him, but, so anyway. But, yeah, apparently this is a photo taken at his house with his wife, Susie Bick, who's a model, of course. In between them doing a photo shoot for her. So
this is a beautiful record though, huh?
Yeah, and I guess the showcase of this is the song Jubilee Street, which become a big live, becomes something else. Like that's what I love about Nick Cave and Bad Seeds. There'll be tracks on albums that become a just big showpiece when you see them live and become this whole other thing. Yeah, I love that. I love the song Mermaids.
I love
Higgs
Mermaids.
Boson Blues is amazing and just gets really out there with the lyrically as well. And this is the kind of the start, I think, of where Warren and Nick, this relationship that's become so strong, it really, musically, especially on this, where they go to this other place and they're experimenting a lot with sounds. It seems like Warren kind of opened up Nick Cave to using things like loops and synthesizers and those kind of sounds. And, when I say it, it might sound crazy, but it actually integrates into his sound really, really well, the way they do it. It's a really, it's not as sparse as, say, like The Boatman's Call, for instance, but it might, like almost ambient sounds in some places, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm even thinking the title track, right? I mean, it's just that is just such a atmospheric, more so than the music. I mean, it's all music, but there is just a sense. The environment that is created with the sound is more important than the notes that are being played. If that makes sense.
And it was weird that this record was like really hit big, and that's when he went from playing like large theaters and stuff to now he plays those places like the Sydney Mine Music Bowl over here, which is a big outdoor venue, and I reckon he's not far off playing the Tennis Centre, which a lot of the big bands play. And I think he's played in that like O2 over in England, which is huge. And it's sort of funny that considering the kind of music, but it just translates well no matter what. Because I haven't always thought that this sort of stuff is way better in a smaller venue, but he makes it work.
Yeah, I mean, he sold out the I would say this is probably normal for North America. Like he is in a pretty consistent selling out theaters that are probably 5,000 to 7,000 people. But it's funny because it's sitting there, and for the people not in the know, there's not a whole lot of people that are selling out 5,000 to 7,000 seat venues that so many people have never heard of. Right? You know what I mean? But this is a beautiful album for sure.
And so after that record was, even though the vinyl version of this has come out a lot more recently, the CD of this, which is the first half, came out. And this is like B-sides and rarities, and this is really worth getting because he's had a ton of great B-sides over the years and other great songs which turn up. So you've got part 2.
I've got the part 2.
This is the whole box and dice. So this has got part 1 and part 2 all together in there, and there's so much great stuff on this. This has, as we were talking about earlier, the acoustic versions of Diana, Mercy Seat, and City of Refuge, which are really, really good. But there's great stuff on here, like and it goes up to like Push the Sky Away. There's the here you go, Red Right Hand, the Scream version, so it was in that movie.
Oh, it was in Scream.
But it definitely was in X-Files, I know that. Great version of Helpless, the Neil Young song. God's Hotel, that's a hilarious song. Songs from film soundtracks like Wim Wenders, stuff like Cassiel's song. Tower of Song, which is a ripper, that's the Leonard Cohen song. And all the great, B-sides, which, like, especially those early ones, which were sort of hard to get, like Rye Whiskey and Running Scared and Six Strings of True Blood. I had to get the whole box because I quite like him.
I clearly.
The only disappointing thing is they're pretty boring records. Like, it's just black on white.
Yeah, well,
I was hoping they might.
I bet you Brian, Embryonic Robot, probably loves the minimalistic approach. No, I remember this was one of the first Nick Cave records I bought, funny enough, because and I have no problem admitting this. This is typically the time that I, pay my money to Jeffrey Bezos, but it was one of those like Amazon glitches where this went on sale for like $15.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, like 70% off, like click. But it's funny because like listening to a lot of these, I'm like, I love them. So, and you don't get that a lot of times with B-sides and rarities, right? Like
No.
usually they're framed in a way that's supposed to be like the nerdy fan thing. But as a casual fan, I was listening to these and I was like, dang, I'm loving these.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's funny because how strong those songs are. Because he's always said that whenever they do a Bad Seeds album, that he's usually only got just enough songs for an album, and then there's all of this, amazing stuff as well.
Yeah.
Okay, then another sort of outside of the studio catalog, Nick Cave and Bad Seeds live from KCRW. This is a great live performance. It's got some great deep cuts. So at the time, Push the Skies Out, so Higgs Boson Blues opens, but then he's got Far From Me off Boatman's Call, Stranger Than Kindness off Your Funeral My Trial. Good, and it's a live to air radio, so it's a good sounding record. The band are in good form. What does it say here? Yeah, they recorded it in 2013 in front of 180 people. No rehearsals, no cameras, no overdubs. I don't think they'd need to rehearse much because they were probably in the middle of a tour at this point. And I particularly like, I think it's the last song, Jack the Ripper, which they do a Ripper version of it, but there's people yelling out, song titles at them in the small crowd. And Nick Cave, I love, he says something along the lines of, eventually one of you will call out the name of the song on this very short list. He's just got that real.
He was hilarious.
Yeah,
I mean, I was not anticipating him to be so funny and charismatic and hilarious.
Yeah, people forget that about him because I guess if you just saw it on surface level of just the records and that, he's got a great sense of humor. He's definitely a deadpan, dry style of humor, which is quite an Australian thing. Which it's good that all these years away, he's never lost that.
Right.
So the opposite of humor in between that and this one is when sadly one of his twin boys died, and this record came out after it. This beautiful Skeleton Tree album, which it's surrounded by, it sounds raw. Like apparently these songs aren't directly about any of that incident or anything because a lot of this stuff they were working on anyway. So, but obviously with the sort of themes that he covers, you can make connections to that as well. But I think you can hear it more in the rawness of the performance and his voice. And I just think this is a beautiful record. Like kind of like nothing else in his catalog. It's one of those rare times he sounds unsure of himself, but in a good way. Like he opens himself up emotionally in a different kind of way than what he had before. And I think he was like really, Warren was his guiding light and just trusted him to, take care of all of the other stuff and he could just perform the songs kind of thing.
Yep.
I don't know if you've seen the One More Time with Feeling documentary, which is about that time of recording.
Okay.
And he's constantly questioning, because this is after his boys died, I'm not sure if this is a good idea to even film this or to, and it's him and his wife speaks and his other boy and him just trying to make things normal again.
Yep.
And so, if can be positives out of any of that horrible stuff, it is a beautiful record, and it's also the start of a different kind of Nick Cave who reached out and wanted to connect with his audience, which he'd always kind of been a bit combative with his audience in the press. And Yeah, and that was, I think, not long after that is when that Red Right Hand Files started. And people just, it amazes me the personal questions that they ask, and he's just so eloquently answers them. And I also saw him do an evening with Nick Cave, and people, and it was literally in the town hall, and people could ask, they'd hand the microphone and ask him anything, you know, and it was, and because he's brilliant, he would also be able to, you know, he had a piano set up, and he'd be like, well, and this song does actually relate to what you were just talking about,
Right.
and so we'd play a song, and but it was interesting because there are a lot of people who, I love Nick Cave, and I have favorite people in that, but I never look at them as anything kind of more than brilliant performers and write amazing songs. And if that connects with me, that's cool. But I don't put them up on a pedestal like they're a golden god kind of thing. And think that just because they're really good at one thing means that they're really good at the rest of life. I'd never expect that out of musicians, sports people, whatever.
Yeah.
So I found it really interesting. A lot of people in those Red Right Hand Files and at that thing I went to, that you could tell that they were searching, like, he'll have the answer. Because a lot of questions would either start with, oh, I recently lost my mum, or
Right.
I've been through drug problems, or blah, blah, blah. And, you know, like, and he was really good. He didn't, you could feel some of the questions the audience kind of like, oh, and groan a bit, but then he would take it seriously and answer it on its merits. And it was quite amazing. It was like a totally different Nick Cave.
It was a connection point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And then there was this cool, not long after that, live EP of him in Copenhagen, where he actually, Distant Sky, where he sings with the soprano who sings on the album. Because when you see him live, if he does that, it's usually like how they sync it up with the video, and she sings that part. But this one, she actually, and I saw they whole concert of this they had in the cinema. It was really, really good. And it's just a 4-track thing with Jubilee Street, Distant Sky, From Her to Eternity, and the Mercy Street. Really, really cool. What are we up to?
Gosh, you're nearing the end, I think. There it is.
Ghosteen, probably the best modern album he has released, in my opinion.
Okay.
I think this is an amazing record. It's a double album, and then I'm not a prog head, so when you're faced with a song that goes for a whole side, I'm a bit cautious of that territory. But the song Hollywood is phenomenal, and even better live. It's just incredible song. Like, I don't know, I can't pick a song off this, because to me this is a front to back stunner, and when I put it on, I go from start to finish. There's no skipping any songs. And then there's the inside of the two lovers, Warren and Nick, frolicking on the beach,
as one does.
Yes, but I think that's just a stunner, this record.
Yeah, beautiful album cover too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's in general, the taste on his album covers, like, there's a lot of portraits, but good shots and well chosen covers. I think there's no Pablo Cruz style covers.
Sir.
And then the Lockdown album,
right?
Which is just basically that photo, him and a piano, and this was you could stream this live at the time during COVID and watch him perform these songs, and it's really good, and he digs deep into all periods. Like, he even does like Man in the Moon, which is a Grinder Man song, on there, which is cool. But yeah, so they filmed this and then it became an album. But I do love on the back, it's got this bit: on the 19th of June 2020, surrounded by COVID officers with tape measures and thermometers, masked up gaffers and camera operators, nervous looking technicians, and buckets of hand gel, we created something very strange and very beautiful that spoke to us in this uncertain time. which I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. And one of the things I've talked about with this record a lot, because this is one of my first records I got into, is that, I mean, it genuinely was a live stream. So, you know, there's no overdubs, there's no edits, there's nothing. And you can hear the imperfections, which like, I mean, there's like a handful of them, but it's, you know, and he's like laughing them off at sometimes and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it was funny, or it's interesting now going back and hearing, you know, I gave this example before, hearing the first time I think I heard Mercy Seat was on this.
Yeah.
And then the next time I hear it, it's live. And that's just an interesting kind of interpretation of hearing and being exposed to these types of songs. But yeah, I mean, this is just him at a piano. I mean, that's it. And it's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, it is. It's great. Like, he over the years has become such a good singer for someone who probably was not, you know, it was the front man more because he was the wild guy back then.
He was always more will than skill, right?
Yeah, he's turned himself into quite a really skilled, good singer. I think him getting off the darts has helped as well, and a bit more cleaner living has helped his voice a lot as well. But yeah, so, and then there's like the actual Lockdown record, which is one of the first ones where it's just credited to Nick Cave and Warren Ellis. So no bad seeds on Carnage. And so, yeah, this is like, I think from what I can gather, it was files sent backwards and forwards, and that's why there's lot of loops and electronic sounds, and the no live drums as far as I can hear. They might have overdubbed stuff post-production. But yeah, and kind of a lyrically angry record too, you know. There's lots of mentions of guns and fucking shooting people and things like that. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on there.
White Elephant seems to remain a bit of a staple. That was a huge song they played.
Yeah. Hand of God, I think, is much better live because it becomes a big song like that. This is a great record. Interesting record, like another one of these outliers, I think, in his catalog.
Yeah. I remember listening to this a couple of weeks ago when I bought it, and I remember listening to side, I mean, I would have to do this again, but listening to side A and being, okay, cool, great, yeah, sounds good, and listening to side B and kind of having my brain fucked up a little bit. Like, I don't know, something about side B just like did something to my giblets that I'm not necessarily proud of, but I'm happy to share it with you. But again, you know, I would have to go back and do it. I was like, you know, showing this was funny when I bought this from a local place that must have done a listening party or something.
Yeah.
They had all these like promotional stickers and stuff like that were still part of the packaging. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cute. I'm going to keep those. All the carnage I'd be eating.
And so here's the live Australian Carnage, and possibly the worst album cover he's ever done.
It's pretty bad, yeah. It looks like a boot. It looks like a boot. Yeah,
it kind of looks like those dodgy classical records in the 80s.
The font is bad, the picture is bad. Yeah.
But it is good. This is like over 2 nights in Sydney Opera House they recorded. And this has got just mainly songs off Carnage and Ghosteen. And I think just the one Breathless, which was off Avatar Blues, Lyra of Orpheus. So. But yeah, good live document. Probably not essential, but if you like hearing live, Nick Cave, like, they do a good job of them. They always have good sound and, of course, great performances as you would expect. But, that's one for the, I guess, collectors.
Right.
And that brings us up to Wild Dog.
That's right. I love this album art, by the way. This is
Great.
yeah, this is an embryonic Brian album art for sure.
Yeah, I got to admit I've grown to like it. At first, I
Okay.
was kind of like, oh, that's a bit lazy, but I think I do like it now. And honestly, this one took me a while.
Okay.
Because the first couple of tracks, it's kind of like he's trying to get that big sound back from Bad Seeds of the '90s,
Mm-hmm.
but it's different at the same time.
Yeah.
And at first, I was kind of like, oh, I'm not sure if this is working for me.
Yep.
Personally, and then I flip it, and what sold me is I think the B side is front to back brilliant.
Yep. I feel
Every
exactly the same way.
Yeah. And then returning to it, like, when you've been with artists you followed for this long, you kind of put the trust into them, and eventually you think the penny will drop, and 9 times out of 10 it does for me. It's like when he changed tack with Push the Sky,
Yep.
which was a very different style of Nick Cave, and for a long time, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure I get it. And then it seems these recent albums, when I go see him live, then it does something. Then I put the record on. It's like, I get it now. It's a great record. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I totally agree with the definitely side two has a completely different. I mean, it finishes so strong. I don't even say too like the last couple of tracks on side A, I find myself liking more so too. Even seeing him live, I mean, he opened up with Song of the Lake, and even live, it felt exactly what you said. Like there's this attempt to go after this sort of big sound, but it just also feels very empty. And so it was kind of interesting actually, because like after him opening up with Song of the Lake, I was just like, okay, this will probably be a pretty good show. And then something happened where he just, clicked it into overdrive. But I totally agree. Side B is a corker, as they say. And yeah, for sure agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, as we're rolling up on 2 hours here, obviously
Whoa.
feel free to share whatever else you have. But I do have
I
very
can quickly
important
go
question.
through just random stuff. But if you want, what was your question? Sorry.
My question was going to be, and feel free to please go through whatever you have or whatever you want to show or talk about. My question was going to be, if you had the famous Ben Rankins top 5, I'm going to need you to pick 5 of your personal favorites. And you can take this anyway. You could do, these are just my favorites. These are 5 recommendations I have for the newbie. This could be 5 corkers. This could be anything you want. But I'm sitting here. I need the 5 favorites is what I need.
Okay.
Across the entire catalog, and everything, and then some.
God, I'm already running out of picks.
He's like, I'm at 12. That's right.
It's tough to leave some of these out, to be honest. That's 4. Okay, I think I've got it.
Okay, and here's the better part. You got to rank.
You
got to rank them too.
Oh fuck, man!
Just kidding. You don't have to do that.
I just grabbed him in as I saw him in the order.
Because here's what I was going to say. Anything that you show that I don't have, I'm going to have to run out and buy yesterday. So, okay.
That second album, Firstborn is Dead. Of course, Your Funeral, My Trial. And then we'll jump to the 90s. I think is a brilliant record. It's hard not to put this one in.
Sure.
And this was tough because it was either going to be this or Push the Sky.
Okay.
Which I think are the two real standouts of the new period of him. And last of all, this is going to be a cheat, but that's what this is all about.
Always.
These go together in my mind, these two birthday party EPs.
Okay.
Which is The Bad Seed and Mutiny. So, yeah, that'll be all different tomorrow.
Well, I guess I got about 400 more records I got to buy. Jesus.
Yeah, sorry about that, but not really sorry.
Yep. Well, that's the point of this whole thing. You got some
While
other
you're
stuff to show?
taking notes, I'll just whip through a few quickies. So that was the Frogs 7-inch, which came out just before Wild God with that postcard. A 10-inch of Give Us a Kiss, which was like a song which you see him recording in the 20,000 Days doco.
Okay, yep.
That is actually not a great song, but you got to have it.
Interesting that you had that there's a Frogs 7-inch.
Yeah.
Because the other, I think one of the pre-singles was Long Dark Night, which I think is a beautiful single.
Mm-hmm.
Was that ever released as a 7-inch?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay.
Yeah. This one is an interesting one. This 10-inch is just him by himself, called 7 Psalms, or Psalms.
For sure.
And these are like his idea of Psalms. So, and it's interesting because the first it's it's spoken word with, and then the second side is the same songs but just instrumental, and and they're all go for about like a minute or something. It's interesting. Yeah, it's train spotter shit for sure, but there's something about it I like.
Fascinating. Okay.
And then, of course, this is one area I haven't got deep into is his soundtracks. So this is a real early one for an Australian film called Ghosts of the Civil Dead. And this is him and Mick Harvey and Blixa Bargeld soundtrack. Really sparse. Yeah, I think this is kind of, with all his stuff with Warren Ellis, this has been kind of forgotten about because it's not lush and beautiful like the other ones, but really good. And then I think this is brilliant, the Proposition soundtrack, which is him and Warren. Actually, around this time when the vinyl version came out, I saw him play, I don't know where I've put it, with him and Warren with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, and they did all of their soundtrack stuff, and it was amazing.
Oh man,
it was really good. And then some, that's the Assassination of Jesse James, which I really like that film, and the soundtrack's great, but there's a moment where Nick Cave has a walk-on in the film. And if you're a Nick Cave person, like, I guess if you don't know Nick Cave, it's like, oh, he's just a guy in a bar who's playing the guitar.
Right.
But for me, it's like, what the fuck is Nick Cave doing in the Wild West, man? It just
doesn't work. Yeah.
It just takes me. The film's great, but that bit just takes me out of the film. And then soundtrack to Documentary. This is really beautiful. Like, they've got. God, I don't even know how many soundtracks they've done now. There's so many, and they've all, as you imagine, like beautiful and ethereal and blah blah blah.
Of course, yeah.
And so a few weird CDs, Live in Germany, 1996, that's really good. I think this is the one. It's either this one or Live at the Royal Albert Hall. One of them has a great version of Where the Wild Grows, and unlike the creepy, deep Blixa vocal, which is on the B-sides and rarities thing, he actually sings in a more tenor voice, which makes me actually, now I've said that, I have a feeling it's Conway Savage singing on this version and not Nick, and not Blixa. It's really good. And then this one, which is Secret Life of the Love Song, 2 lectures by Nick Cave. And it's also got, performances of his love songs, played just by him and talking about what makes a love song. And in this, he like professes his absolute love for the Dirty Three, who he says writes the best love songs of all. And the Ass or the Angel, which is readings from that book accompanied by music. Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, White Luna stuff. I think it's got bits from film soundtracks, but also other things that they've done together which didn't appear on film soundtracks.
He's got really that good. First Grinder Man album look going on with that handlebar.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's these. They reissued his back catalogue on CD from From Her to Eternity up to Dig Lazarus Digs. That was the current one at the time. And the interesting thing why these, if you're a fan, are worth getting is not only do you have like the album, they have like all of them have a DVD, and it's like just headshots of the band members who played on that record and fans of that record who were either actors or other musos or just fans talking about why they love that record. And it's interesting because Nick Cave is the only person not present in them film. So,
right.
And it goes through all period, like it goes up to that album, and it's fun. It's really interesting seeing as it goes along the younger bands who are like, oh no, this is my favorite Nick Cave record, and ones you just wouldn't even expect. So it's really cool to, if you can find them. The Into My Arms CD single, which I bought that the day it came out, and it's got two good B-sides, Little Empty Boat and Right Now I'm a Roaming. Sorry, this is big.
I told you, this is definitive and comprehensive. The best thing on YouTube in regards to Nick Cave.
And the 20,000 Days. This is really interesting because it's all like, it's a documentary, but it's all set up.
Yeah.
And the idea was like they created these like scenes of him like driving in the car, and then Blixer appears. And
right.
they talk about why did Blixer leave? So they actually get into the nitty gritty of stuff. And Kylie Minogue appears in the back of his car, and then he's on a psychologist's couch and talking about stuff like that. It's really interesting. And of course that one which I showed before, which this is really good. This is the Australian version of, the classic album series.
Yep.
I think. So this is just called Great Australian Albums, and this is the one on Murder Ballads.
Okay.
And there was also one on the Triffids album, The Saints, Go Between, stuff like that. And then great doco and live show, The Road to God Knows Where, which is a black and white film of their tour of America in the 1990s, and there's like endless arguments with sound guys not supplying the right gear.
That's unbelievable.
And then live at the Paradiso show, which is magnificent. Then just their videos of their film clips back when that was a thing. And they do generally make great film clips, I think. God Is in the House, which is a live show around the No More Shall We Part tour, which is a fantastic tour. They were really good. Same thing again, the Abattoir Blues tour. This one's a really, really good show too, with the full-on gospel thing. Lovely Creatures, which is a best of, but I mainly bought it because it's got like a DVD of all little bits and pieces of random live stuff and film clips and interviews, and it's pretty cool. And then I'll just finish off with the books. The biography, apparently he hates this. His novel, of course, And the Ass or the Angel, which is tough work, but it's ultimately a rewarding book.
Worth it, yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like The Death of Bunny Munro, where I think this is like the opposite. It's like quite, well, look at the cover and it sort of says everything you need to know about that. Yeah. A armchair guide to Nick Cave, Kicking Against the Pricks. And last of all, you know, I don't even have like half of the shit that's available.
Right.
And this great book, A Little History by Bled and Butcher, which is all great photographs throughout their time. So it's got, I think it goes from nearly the start right up to, there's Nick Harvey, which is probably about 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's probably about it of all my bits and pieces, besides I didn't get out ticket stubs and things like that.
How many times have you seen him?
I don't know. I could count and tell you, but I don't think I've missed a tour since the Henry's Dream tour in '92. Okay.
Yeah.
And I've seen all different versions of like Bad Seeds. I've seen Grinder Man. I've seen him solo. I've seen the stuff he did with the MSO. I've seen him at festivals, seen his side shows. Yeah. The only thing is I've never seen him when I've been overseas. I've only seen him in Australia.
Okay, got you. I mean, that's the place to see him. So.
Yeah, he does, especially when he plays in Melbourne, he gets a pretty warm reception from the crowd. They love him.
Even though they didn't care 40 years ago.
Well, yeah.
Well, Ben, this was awesome. I sincerely appreciate you taking the nearly 2.5 hours out of your life to show us everything. I mean, this is exactly kind of what I wanted, which was like, I'm a bit of you're an expert, and I'm like the young Padawan, if you will.
I don't know about that.
Which I think is a Star Wars reference. I don't know the Star Trek Wars people. But I'm like the neophyte, you know, you're in it. So this was perfect because now I'm like, dang.
I'm into it, but I know I've got lots of stuff, but there's people way more than me, and I'm not so good at where like with dates, and people are like, oh, and he was wearing pink socks when he recorded this song and all that shit. Yeah, I'm not that deep with that stuff.
Well, and I don't have those people's contact info anyway, so it's like, you know, it's perfect here. But I got my list, I got my homework, and
and a lot of editing to do,
and some editing to do because someone, that's right. Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much. Hope the people out there that sat through this is going to live on YouTube for the end of time. This is what we like to call, this is going to be an evergreen video, Ben. So people can just, 5 years from now, they're going to be able to find it when they need their Nick Cave fix, and we'll give it to them.
Yeah, and they can pick holes at everything I said. Everything I may have got wrong.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate you, and thanks everybody for watching. Check out Ben. Thanks. He's the best. He is the absolute best, and much better and better looking than I will ever be, and far more worth it in this cruel, cruel world. Ben, thank you, sir. Take care, and we'll see you all out there. All right.
Thanks, mate. See ya.
Thanks.